The Year Overlooked, 1989, Part 2. I started off Part 1 talking about the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. That was just the tip of the iceberg for all Nintendo in 1989. They had two other shows that same year. And oh boy, what a doozy of a pair. The Legend of Zelda and Captain N cartoon TV shows.
This is the Triforce of Wisdom, Link.
You ever wonder why Link doesn't talk? Look no further.
We're even. Besides, I hate wet kisses.
Well, excuse me, princess.
Yeah, Link was problematic. And people thought the fairy from Ocarina of Time was annoying. I don't know what's with these Nintendo cartoons completely failing at capturing the design of villains. It only ran for 13 episodes, it was cancelled. For a Saturday morning cartoon, it was okay. It's animated well enough, the voice acting is decent, the orchestrations of the Zelda music sounds great. It's the first time anyone would hear the soundtracks like this.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
Captain N the Game Master is remembered more fondly than the Zelda cartoon. It has a cool intro of a live-action kid, Kevin, being sucked into his TV while playing NES with his dog, but now he's known as Captain N. And all sorts of old-school video game characters like this Simon Belmont and Green Frog-sounding Mega Man, and the kid from Terminator 2 as Pit, or Kid Icarus in the show, and he says Icarus this and Icarus that. Yeah, the adaptations of these characters are terrible. Everything you could get wrong, they did. Back then, okay, there wasn't a whole lot to reference, but come on, Mother Brain looks nothing like Mother Brain, and sounds like Audrey from Little Shop of Horrors, because it is. Levi Stubbs provided the voice.
Beautiful goddess that I am, become queen of any old land.
And King Hippo and the Eggplant Wizard just seem like random choices. Then hey, Link and Zelda show up.
Kevin, let's try it your way. This is gonna take two of us.
Just like Zelda, Captain N isn't the worst cartoon of all time, but it just really did a disservice to some of the greatest NES characters. I mean, doing Mega Man and Simon Belmont like that, it's just not right. Mysteries of the Unknown, a book series released throughout the 80s and 90s, covering a wide range of topics that are mostly conspiracy theories. But sometimes, like with this 89 edition, Hauntings, you get to learn about all sorts of ghosts and haunted places. Learn about the murdered actor William Terrace and the London theater he haunts, or at Wildenstein Castle, a German castle that reportedly had tons of haunting during World War II, or even England's most haunted house. The stories alone wouldn't interest most people, but having accompanying images of said places, or supposed drawings and writings by ghosts, it's all cool stuff right here. Even has images of ghosts caught on film. I mean, this was before Photoshop, but yeah, some of them look a little whack. The presentation of the books are really great. The use of black to create that mystic look. Tons of pictures and illustrations throughout the entire thing. And these pages and images have like a neat silver sheen to them. It's all very creative, and don't you just miss physical media like this? The topics, yeah, not all of them are fascinating. I'm not sure how much I'd enjoy the Power of Healing edition, but for the most part, yeah, you got the UFOs, out-of-body experiences, Atlantis, the mysteries of outer space. Now we're talking. There were about 30 of these books made, and, topics like this would only survive in book form thanks to the lack of the internet. I mean, once that came around, blogs and websites would cover all these sorts of topics, and these were even before unsolved mysteries. So people into things like this, they had to rely on books. Sweet Home, directed by the very experimental horror director Kiyoshi Kurosawa. It's a haunted house type of movie with a crew of filmmakers attempting to document a famous artist's forgotten artifacts inside this mansion. Nothing cutting edge in terms of plot, but the execution, the special effects, this is great. There's something different about Japanese ghost stories that hit differently than, say, stuff like Paranormal Activity. This movie released along with a Famicom game by Capcom. It's an interesting RPG, not your typical Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest. You are the film crew, but each character have their own abilities and unique weapons to fight off ghosts and demons. You can split the members up any way you want to cover more ground, though when you get attacked, you have to switch over to the other parties and run to the rescue. It's an awesome concept for an older RPG like this, and it hasn't really been done since. It would influence Capcom director Shinji Mikami, and in '96 he made an updated version of the game, but this time called it Resident Evil. And from there, Resident Evil influenced all sorts of survival horror games. But yeah, it all started with Sweet Home in '89. Not much is said about Sweet Home, the game, or the movie these days, because, yeah, the game was only released on Famicom in Japan, and never ported to anything else. But then there was also lawsuits going on with the movie once it released on VHS. The producer of the movie took it upon himself to edit the home version, thus creating a feud with the director. And in the end, you only ever had the initial VHS and Laserdisc release of this movie. No other versions exist.
All action. American gladiators. Get ready to take on the toughest competition.
I talked about PSAs in part 1, something so unintentionally funny about these serious topics. Continuing in that vein are safety videos. Man, I don't know why these things just turn out to be so entertaining. Luckily, people have been uploading these more and more. Check out a few of them from '89.
Cause when you ride like a dope, you end up in the dirt. You sing, squirm, and crawl, all embarrassed or hurt.
The bike safety one is a classic. I remember watching this when I was in school, years after this was released.
Bicycle Safety Camp has been brought to you by
Deli food safety. I worked at a deli once, and this is all just very common, obvious stuff to know.
When one product contaminates another with potentially hazardous bacteria, it's called cross-contamination.
Party safety video. Not sure why they went with the mime gimmick here.
Wear brightly colored costumes, short enough to prevent tripping.
I'm wearing this orange cat costume.
'89 was a great year for the arcades. You had massive beat-em-up hits in Japan like Final Fight and Ninja Turtles, but there was one overlooked release here in the West, and that was Turbo Outrun. The original '86 Yu Suzuki game was a massive hit for an interactive arcade game. 3 years later, Turbo Outrun didn't change the formula much. You still control a Ferrari in either a sit-down cabinet or a stand-up version. The stand-up one is cool. You have the wheel, the gear, pedals, and a turbo button. Yeah, the turbo button was really the only big difference this time around. But the graphics popped, and the music still remains influential to this day. But other than Turbo Outrun, you can't overlook some of the shoot-em-ups that came out that year. Irem's R-Type 2, Konami's Gradius 3, and Taito's Darius 2. Shoot-em-ups were kings in the arcade. No other type of game ate up more quarters. Choosing one to favorite depends on one major factor. Do you prefer your games vertically or horizontally? And from there you get into the nuances, the power-ups, the way the ships attack. And they all have great soundtracks and visuals. The coolest of the three though has to be Darius 2 for the bench seating and the wider screen, a rarity at the arcades at the time. Good luck finding any of these nowadays though. Sometimes you'll get lucky and find R-Type 2, but this Darius 2, nah, it's super rare. Video games were beginning to become more portable in '89. Nintendo released the Game Boy. It was a smash hit, and now you're able to have full gaming experiences in your pocket, as long as you had enough batteries and lighting. Also released in '89 was the Atari Lynx, and it failed miserably. Nintendo once again putting a final nail in that Atari coffin. Game Boy released with the likes of Tetris and Super Mario Land, both amazing games. The Lynx released with Electro Cop, Yeah, never heard of it. Blue Lightning is pretty decent though. The Game Boy and Tetris could have been the major factor of Lynx's abysmal failure.
Genesis brings you Golden Axe, the 16-bit arcade challenge. You travel a treacherous route, face the most powerful enemy.
McGee and Me is a Christian children's educational show with your typical lessons learned at the end of each episode. There's only a dozen or so episodes, but what makes this one stand out is the incorporation of a cartoon character, McGee. It's kind of cool to see how the cartoon interacts with real-life objects. The bullies come straight out of a comic book.
Oh, come on, that is enough.
Poor kid. And come on, it's not the 80s without skateboarding. Most episodes deal with things like sportsmanship and speaking up to bullies and the importance of friendship. Classic kids' sitcom lessons. But yeah, sometimes you gotta learn about fear and putting trust in God and learning to trust God more than your fellow man. Kung Fu Louie is definitely a nostalgia pick. In the corners of my mind, there was a game I'd play on DOS. All I remembered was you fought people on a street. Okay, it didn't really narrow things down. But I remembered if you got game over, you'd appear in front of a warehouse full of bad guys. Well, luckily my brother found out the game decades later. Kung Fu Louie really represents those Wild West days of early PC gaming. Awful controls, tons of pixelated violence. So yeah, the game is pretty easy until you get to the final boss. Then it's like, what happened? I've read that mecha-based anime is one of the more niche in the genre, which has always been surprising to me. Sure, there are some lame ones out there, but the classics like Gundam, it's deep stuff. The original Universal Century releases, always depicting the terrors of war, so they aren't totally mainstream. But sometimes you gotta get through the depressing stuff to feel better about yourself. And Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket is one of the best to do it. What makes War in the Pocket stand out is that it boils down the atrocities Tomino tooled around with on his series in just 6 episodes. Future releases like 08th MS Team and Stardust Memory capture that same type of atmosphere, but not the overall feel that this one does, thanks in part to the story centering around a child, as he befriends both the Federation soldier and Zeon soldier. Japanese focus on the innocence of youth. A great concept. The Gundam Alex is mostly forgotten about because it's a simplistic design, and compared to what would come later, all pointy and odd looking, yeah, it gets lost in the shuffle. The rookie pilot Chris palling around with Zeon rookie Bernie, and then the two meeting on the battlefield, classic stuff right there. Yeah, and it's pretty bleak, especially with the Christmas setting. In war, everybody loses. The laugh tracks, yeah, I love it. But no, Family Matters was great. It started out innocent enough, had some important messages, and of course, who doesn't love Steve Urkel? But I'm not here to talk about all of that. Check out the weirder episodes of this show to see some really bizarre TV. Any of the Halloween episodes with Stevel, an evil doll version of Steve Urkel.
Okay, now it's personal.
The weirdest though has to be set in the clones. Urkel creates different versions of himself, including a cool version.
Boy, Al, I'm Santa Claus. Great. You get to bring gifts to children all over the world. I don't know who's been naughty or nice. I do.
You'll never know which house he'll turn up in, except on Quantum Leap Wednesday.
This is going to be a reoccurring segment on my channel because the Goemon games, I think, are the most overlooked games ever. Mainly because only 4 of them came over here to the West, despite there being over 20 of them in Japan. Ganbare Goemon 2, released for the Famicom in '89, continues the story of fabled Japanese hero Goemon and his partner in crime, Ebisumaru. The setting is classic Japan, But the fun comes from the bizarre enemies, based on all sorts of yokai and strange robots. There is no rhyme or reason in terms of story and characters, but that's what makes these games good. It's an adventure game. You go through different towns and castles, trying to reach the end of the stage in a non-linear fashion. There are secret passageways to find, stores to buy items from, and pretty cool boss fights. Translated ROMs exist for most of these games. In a way, I can see why Konami barely ported any of them, full of cultural references that American kids probably would just be confused by. But still no excuse in my opinion. Throughout the 80s and 90s, Japan released a monthly Halloween-themed magazine that focused on everything horror. Makeup, manga from the likes of legendary Kazuo Umezu and the then upcoming Junji Ito. Even movies like Creepshow and Return of the Living Dead got manga parodies. You know, these magazines were targeted for a female audience? But yeah, I wish I could get my hands on these. But good luck finding them now. Obnoxious eBay pricing.
You know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying, right?
Going Overboard, a 1989 movie starring Adam Sandler. Some people consider it a cult classic. Not every bad movie needs to be a cult classic, and not every cult classic needs to be a bad movie. Hold on, let me pause this. So what even makes something a cult classic? Is it a movie that did bad in the theaters and at the box office that later finds its niche audience on VHS release? Or is it as simple as something that's so bad that it's good? It could be one of those two, but I certainly don't think a movie like Going Overboard should be considered a cult classic. The Wizard, starring Fred Savage, has all the workings of a cult classic. Negative reviews from the critics, a niche subject matter like playing NES games, niche for the time at least, a goofy chase scene, a gaming tournament, and a badass with a power glove.
What is that? I don't know. Power glove.
This audio was eventually used by Horse the Band. Also, the power glove doesn't make sounds when you touch the buttons. Those effects were taken from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Yeah, it's a movie obviously targeted to kids. It was the 80s version of the Minecraft movie, I guess. Instead, replaced Minecraft with NES and Mario 3. It did okay in theaters, but it didn't really get popular until it was released on VHS. Yeah, funny moments and Nintendo games aside, it's actually a movie about two brothers bonding over the trauma of their sister drowning and using a Nintendo tournament across the country as a coping mechanism. Yeah, we all deal with grief differently, and when you think of it that way, the movie becomes a bit sadder. The Power Glove. It was a third-party accessory released for the NES. Came out around the same time as The Wizard, but it didn't really work as well as it did in the movie. I don't think you can play Rad Racer with this thing. The Power Glove was a massive success, actually, and there were a ton of people involved with its development. It's such an odd little thing that really became a cultural phenomenon. It's even in the Kung Fury movie.
What's your problem? What? What is it?
Speaking of NES, a lot of great games were released in '89. River City Ransom, Castlevania 3, DuckTales, but one of the best of the year was released by Nintendo themselves, Mother. It didn't release here in the West, only available on Famicom. It would later be officially translated for the Switch as Earthbound Beginnings, but this game here is the beginning to one of the greatest and often overlooked trilogies in Nintendo's history. Shigesato Itoi. He created something special with this series, capturing the imagination of youth and the dangers of innocence and processing loss. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what type of game Mother is, I mean, yeah, it's an RPG. The use of music fits the narrative thanks to composers Keiichi Suzuki and Hirokazu Tanaka. There's a very odd enemy selection, and that bittersweet tone of it all makes it special. Emotion plays a big role in these games, focusing on the interpretation of what exactly mother means. Is it our planet? Our actual birth-giving mothers? I don't know. But it's a magical game that Nintendo for some reason just never released over here. It really is a great experience. Get through the beginning tutorial and maybe print out a guide so you know where you're going. But you'll experience a funny and touching game.
エンディングまで泣くんじゃない。名作保証。マザーついに大完成。
Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
A kids show with a bunch of puppets, and why not? Jim Henson made puppets cool in the 80s, and the sets and characters are all great. It's about sorcerer Eureka and friends. Throw in some music, claymation and cartoons, and skits with kids in them, and it's just a fun show. And come on, look at these cute kittens. It's classic Nickelodeon. This released alongside Hey Dude, a live-action show about kids at a summer camp. That set still exists in the deserts of Arizona. Well, I mean, it's abandoned and decrepit now. The original Orlando Studios Nickelodeon was cool, wasn't it? And I'll always love a show like Eureka's Castle, just because there are so many props and fun sets. Doesn't matter how old it is. Oh, and the writer for the show was R.L. Stine, you know, the Goosebumps guy. Sometimes you see a movie and it completely changes your life for one reason or another. That for me was Shinya Tsukamoto's Tetsuo the Iron Man. I don't know why, but now there's life before Tetsuo and life after Tetsuo. 89 was a treasure trove of experimental Japanese movies. Talked about Sweet Home, but there was also Gunhead, a movie about a big prop mecha in a dystopian future. And Battle Heater, a very low-budget movie rife with practical effects. And of course, Tetsuo the Iron Man, another experimental movie with tons of practical effects, innovative camera techniques, a killer industrial soundtrack, and about 10 lines of dialogue. Director Shinya Tsukamoto is one of the all-time greats in my opinion, and I'm going to talk about him every chance I get on this channel. He also plays the main villain, a zombie, ghost. It's not exactly explained, but he comes back to haunt the salaryman who killed him in a hit and run. That salaryman was played by punk band Bachikaburi's frontman, Tomorrow Taguchi. Most of the cast and crew were Tsukamoto's friends and film buddies. Even the assistant director Shozen Fukui went on to direct some of his own unique movies. So what is Tetsuo about? I mean, for one, he's technically a metal man, not an Iron Man, and really it's a glorified student film, but it's one you just go and experience with the visual assaults and Chu Ishikawa's soundtrack. He would go on to contribute music to most of Tsukamoto's movies, and it doesn't get much deeper than that. Sometimes a monster movie is just that, a monster movie. Nintendo was more or less ruling the gaming world in '89 over here in the West, but Sega releases the Sega Genesis that same year, starting the great console wars of the '90s. Atari is barely hanging in there, and the Japanese company NEC releases their PC Engine over here as the TurboGrafx 16. It was closer to the NES in terms of power and graphics, so just a bit of bad timing, especially because it was a couple of years old at that point. And with the Sega Genesis out, customers would rather spend their money on the slightly stronger hardware. The TurboGrafx 16 launched with an odd choice, Keith Courage, based on an anime, Mashinhiro Wataru. It had okay reviews. Alien Crush was the much better received game, though it being a pinball game would have made a questionable launch choice. It wouldn't be until the following year when Bonk's Adventure was released that the TurboGrafx 16 would have a contender for a 2D platforming mascot. But by that time, it was kind of too late, at least here in the US, for the console. That being said, going back and trying to find the gold released on the console in '89, all roads led me to Blazing Lasers, a vertical shoot 'em up exclusive to the TurboGrafx 16. It still holds up today, has solid, smooth gameplay, which of course is crucial for a game like this. Fantastic sounds and soundtrack. So yeah, I would say Blazing Lasers is an often overlooked game now, for two reasons. It's on a console that barely sold at all over here in the West, and two, the developers Compile, they made hardcore shoot 'em up games. It's beloved in the genre, but yeah, they were always niche over here in the West. Alright, thanks for watching everyone. That's a wrap on 1989. Next month it'll be a new year. Are we going to go closer to 2025 or back to 1975? Stay tuned.